This is the dining room. Oh, that is a lovely sized room. Yes, they are big in these houses. Most of them have been converted into flats, so to get one like this, a bit of a lucky find.
How many bedrooms is it?
It's 2, but there is the box room, which could be an office or could be used as a 3rd bedroom.
I think we definitely need 3 double bedrooms.
Did I ask you? Did I ask you?
Shall we move into the kitchen?
Oh, lovely kitchen.
Well, it's not the biggest one I've seen, but they have made great use of the space. The fridge set into the wall.
Oh, that's nice.
And there's a fully electric hob.
Really don't like electric. You can't gauge the heat properly.
Did I ask you? Did I ask you? Look at me. Look at me in the eye. Did I ask you? Don't vex me, yeah?
And you can probably negotiate the washing time. Shall we pop up the stairs? So, that's the house. Any more questions?
I don't think so, darling.
Well, I do have another couple coming to see it this afternoon. Second viewing, so...
Yeah, I really like it, but it's a bit too expensive for us.
Look, I know this is the most expensive purchase you're ever going to make. I understand that. So if you and Hobby need a little more time to mull it over, you got my number.
Well, to be honest, it's a little bit out of our price range.
Did I ask you? Did I ask you?
No,
Buy this house.
I can't afford it.
Buy it.
Well, I have to take it back.
Buy it.
Look, please don't.
Buy it.
Look, please don't.
Buy it.
Look, I beg you.
Buy it.
Stop it.
Buy it.
You can't do it.
Buy
This
it.
is really
Buy it.
Please.
Buy it.
I won't do it.
Buy it.
Okay.
Great! Let's go back to my office and sign the paperwork. Ooh, I am having a busy day.
All right. Anyway, I thought that was kind of funny. So Josh is going to talk to us today about his best negotiating skills, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Oh, let me get out of this video. Cool. All right. Well, Josh, thanks so much for joining us today, man. I really appreciate it.
You bet. Thanks for having me. Appreciate the invite.
No, we're gonna learn a lot and drill down. And so we got an hour here. And then, as always, guys, who's ever joining in, if you have any questions for Josh along the way, go ahead and throw them in the chat, and then we'll get started. So I know a lot of you guys already know Josh, and actually, to be honest, I don't know Josh all that well. And so this is maybe going to be more for me. And so we've obviously rubbed shoulders a little bit at the different RIAs and whatever. So I'll just kind of introduce him and kind of reread the bio that he gave, and then we'll jump right into it. So Josh is the founder and president of the Chandler Group. He has built the Chandler Group into an integrated and successful firm. Mr. Zieglowski's primary responsibilities, I shouldn't have said that, Josh's primary responsibilities include asset and portfolio management, broker relations, investor and client relations, banking relations, economic and demographic trends, market analysis, due diligence oversight, financial oversight, acquisition and disposition strategies, transactional oversight, and business development. So basically everything from A to Z. In 2019 alone, the Chandler Group purchased over $7 million in assets, and they were set to purchase over $15 million in 2020. In one case, they bought a strip center for $2 million in August 2019, where they already have increased the value to $3.4 million. We're going to talk about that in a little bit more detail about how he did that. When Josh isn't working in real estate, he's spending time with his wife, Taryn, of 19 years, 4 kids, 2 boys, 2 girls. Josh grew up in Morgan, Utah, and currently he's live from Mountain Green, right? Josh, is that where you're at?
No, that's right. I grew up technically. I live in Layton right now.
Oh, I'm sorry. That's right. You live in Layton. That's right. So he's in his bunker in Layton. Multi-sport athlete. His love for basketball, but his love was in basketball. Now, years later, he donates his time in coaching his 2 older boys on how to be a better basketball player and person. Josh is a big proponent of having coaches with having success in sports through coaching. In 2003, he and Jeff Rappaport, Sorry, I got to admit people as we go along here. I still haven't figured out that Zoom trick, how to not do that. Jeff Rappaport coached him to get his start in residential real estate in 2015. Today, he's continually coached on how to succeed in the realm of commercial real estate. One thing you should know about Josh is he's a big dude, but a huge teddy bear. So
That's
there you go. You do look a
hearing
little
about.
intimidating though, man, you know, with the beard and everything.
I know, and I shaved it recently with losing weight, so it was pretty deep. But we were out on vacation about 3-4 weeks ago, and I noticed the last couple of times I've traveled. I went to Charleston, South Carolina about 2 months ago, maybe 2.5 months ago, and then we went to the Ozarks. And every time, wearing the mask, because I don't get out much, so I don't have to wear it too much. But when I wear it, the beard was coming up and inside the mask. So it was almost like when I took off the mask, I had a beard mask.
Right.
So, so I was like, okay, I'm going to shave the beard until this is all over. So it might be, tomorrow might be months.
Well,
So,
I feel your pain with facial hair. I want to invent the pill that just blasts it all away. I'm ready to go all bald. So I don't want to worry about the beard. So anyway, you look good with the beard. So quick weight loss. What's your progress there? What are you shooting for, and what are you doing to achieve that?
So I have another 20 pounds I'm working towards. I'm down 70 pounds right now since the end of January. Yeah. I made a goal this year to read or listen to a book a week. And I listened to the book called 4 Hour Body about the third week of the year by Tim Ferriss. And I just was sold on what he was selling. So I kind of went that direction, and COVID was helpful because I wasn't able to meet with people for lunch. So,
yeah, right.
I was able to exercise and do all my stuff virtually. So I was able to lose weight.
Well, that is awesome. So what's the key to success in doing that? I think I know the answer that I would say for me, but what's the key to success that you've seen to lose those 70 pounds? And for me, it's the simplest thing, but it's the hardest thing to consistently do.
Well, they say what do they say? The weight loss starts in the kitchen, but I would just say what I also did is I kind of used, you can look up here, I have a vision board.
Yep.
I kind of also went the direction of, restarting a vision board the first year. And so telling myself that I'm going to achieve these things at the very first of the day and the very end of the day has helped.
That's awesome.
A lot.
No, and I'm sure as that theme will go through what we talk about with, with real estate. And the joke I always make is like, the workout you need to work on when you're losing weight is the push plate, right? Yeah. Like it's the hardest movement in exercising, but it's pushing that plate out of the way, right? The push plate.
Well, when I went to the gym, my favorite machine was the vending machine. So
that's awesome. All right. So take us back a little bit. How old are you?
40.
40. Okay. So what did you do before, just kind of his background? What did you do before you got into real estate? Like professionally? You've been married 19 years, right? You got to support your family somehow.
Yeah. I was in the mortgage business.
Okay.
So, I started American First Credit Union as just a loan officer and moved my way up to have my own brokerage. And at one time, me and 2 other partners had close to about 200 loan officers in Texas, California, Arizona, Utah.
Wow.
And then we were one of the top producers of Countrywide for quite some time. And then we sold a piece of that business and then started something in Bountiful with a company called City First Mortgage, just to be a branch off from there. We just wanted to be Utah based. And then when I was there is when I met Jeff from a friend of a friend that was losing her house actually, and she was going to his class and went to his class. And I get sold pretty easy. I'm an easy sell. So Jeff sold me pretty easily. I just knew it was something that not just I wanted to do, something I needed to do.
And what Jeff was selling back then was coaching?
Yeah, and I'm saying I'm an easy sell because that's the 4 Hour Body. I bought what Tim Ferriss was selling too.
Yeah.
So,
hey, but that's good. If it's something that's going to be good for you, that's the best thing you can do is just say yes, right? Yeah, I'm in. Let's go.
Believe me, I've said yes that things haven't worked out. And it's just like the Michael Jordan quote that says he's taken thousands of shots, but that's why he succeeds.
Yep. I agree with that. Okay. So you kind of got, I mean, you had seen up to that point, probably a bunch of really weird and crazy finance transactions that maybe you weren't in the weeds on, you know, the post and the after and to see how it turned out. I mean, if you were one of the biggest ones for Countrywide, you probably saw some really weird loans that you were funding that probably were an attempt at being an investment, right? I mean, Countrywide back in the day would kind of offer really crazy loans for investors.
If you had a pulse, you can get a mortgage.
Yeah.
I mean, it was pretty bad. And you know, luckily, you know, we were able to kind of get out of that and get into the real estate business and kind of skirted out of that. But you know, there was plenty of times, I mean, that you saw people making $30,000-$40,000 a year that are buying $1 or $2 million investment properties, you know, and they didn't work, you know. So the time period when you met Jeff, this was only maybe like 5 or 6 years ago. No, Jeff's the one who taught me residential real estate. So
okay, gotcha.
This was back in 2003.
Got it. So this okay.
He won't claim that he's been teaching that long, you know, but he's been teaching a long time. And so him and I have been good friends for a long time. And then about 4.5 years ago, I got into the commercial scene, and then just kind of reconnected with Jeff at that point, really. So when you were, let's just kind of build up to this, you know, I like hearing everybody's story because I know there's people on the call that maybe want to get to where they want to get sooner, right? But for you, for all of us, it's a little bit of a journey, right? So I always think it's good to hear people's journey, right? Like, so you start with mortgages, then you slugged around a little bit in residential. Were you working as an agent or investments, or when you got into residential, what were you doing there? I was just doing mortgages. So, okay. And I was actually kind of recommended from Jeff not to become a realtor at the time. I don't know how he feels about that now or not, but so I didn't become a realtor. I just became an investor. And actually, I can tell you quick about my first deal because there's a little story there. Please. So Jeff told me, hey, bring me every deal that you can find. And these are the people I want you to talk to. Call your top 25 name list. And it almost felt like MLM-ish a little bit. So I'm calling my 25 name list and asking them if they knew anybody that was losing their house or in foreclosure. And a friend of mine says, hey, my dad's losing his body shop, but I think he already lost it. So I gave him a call. His name was Jeff too. And, you know, come to find out, he gave the keys back to the bank, but they haven't foreclosed on it. And it was a house and like 2 bays for a body shop, right? And it's been vacant for 3 or 4 years. So I said, well, what do you owe? And he goes, well, that's the thing. It's only worth $200,000 probably, and I owe $600,000. I have IRS liens, tax liens, Young Chevrolet, just all these liens, you know? And so I'm like, oh, there's probably nothing we can do. And I said, but, you know, Jeff told me to contact him. So I contacted him. Jeff says, hey, there might be something we can do there. If there's multiple liens and there's one first mortgage, let's go to these other liens and see if we can get them negotiated. Go back to this guy, get an authorization, start talking to the bank. So I started doing that, talking to all these different lien holders, and then having them take 5 to 10 cents on the dollar and telling them, hey, we're going to close this in 90 days. So I put everyone out 90 days, maybe even 60 days. I think it was 60 days. So I had everyone negotiated, and all the way down to about $150,000, you know. And as I was doing that, now I put a for sale sign. I went and got a 3x6 vinyl sign, and I put my phone number on it. And over 2 or 3 weeks, nobody called, not nobody. And we were thinking, should we list it? No, it's not listed. Let's just try to sell. We only have 60 days, and that's not fair to the realtor and all that stuff. So we just started thinking, and about 2 or 3 weeks before our deadline, because we had a 60-day deadline, me and my partner were sitting there talking about different marketing strategies. And back in the day, there was things called fax machines. I think we've heard of those before. Yeah. Well, back when there was fax machines, people used to send spam faxes, just like spam emails. And so you'd get into the office and you see this tray of spam faxes. And usually it was like, hey, go to the Bahamas for $99 for a whole week. You know, it was advertisements like that. I'm sure some of you guys have seen it. Yeah, like the Morris Murdoch travel, right? Exactly. Like they're feeling it, right? Yeah. So we used that mentality, and we developed our own marketing paper, and then we bought a software called WinFax. So we put the phone number in there, we went to the yellow pages, and we copy and pasted as much phone numbers as we could find within about a 5 to 10 mile radius in Ogden. And we blasted out that night. We woke up the next morning, we got 3 calls, and one of them was from a company called Hadley Brothers Paint. And they came over, they looked at our facility, they went through it, and they said, hey, I know you guys are wanting $195 for this, but we can't pay $195. I'm like, okay. And he goes, we'll give you $190 cash, we'll close Friday. I'm like, donezo. So, we ended up making $33,000 on our first deal. And it was kind of crazy because I tell people all the time, I had so many opportunities to quit, so many opportunities. But for me, it wasn't just because of me not quitting. It was mostly because Jeff, as my coach, wouldn't let me quit.
Yeah.
And told me there was opportunity and there was something at the end of the rainbow. And he gave me that belief level. And so I thank Jeff all the time for that, because I would not be where I was at today if I didn't have a coach mentor like him.
Dude, that is awesome. I mean, that right there, you could break down all the different aspects of that story into a weekend training. But the one thing that I liked and that reminded me, again, point of my doing these calls is one idea that someone can act on and make a difference in their business today. But you hit the phones. I love that, right? You hit the phones. You maybe didn't know what you were calling for or why you were calling, but I have a buddy of mine who always talks about marketing in the area, right? We always joke with him that he's always off, at another table talking to somebody, or he's on the phone. It's like he's just marketing in the area, right? Like, so you're just marketing in the area. You're doing your thing. You're calling your sphere of influence. And then when you kind of got stuck and maybe you lost the momentum, I think that's great too, is like, what can we do to pick up the momentum with what we're trying to do? And so that's when the magic happens, when you start brainstorming, especially with someone else, maybe a mentor. It's like, well, let's start blasting faxes, right? And you never know what's going to happen, but obviously something awesome happens. So if anyone's out there with kind of a deal that's stuck, it may not be stuck. And actually, Josh, if you don't mind, I just barely looked at Facebook. This kind of goes to your Facebook post. I think this is really relevant. Will you kind of share that story? Because it is kind of about, do you have a diamond in the rough? And you kind of had a little bit of a diamond in the rough here, and not everyone's going to see value the same way. And that'll go into what we talk about with some of your commercial deals about that Nissan car or whatever it was.
Oh, gotcha. Okay. Yeah. Yeah. Well, it's kind of like, I did my CRE call this morning, my Zoom call. And the one thing I talked to people about was, I lost weight recently, like we just talked about.
Yep.
But the thing is I have started on Monday 1,000 times, meaning a new diet. Like, oh, I'm starting Monday. Monday is where I'm starting. And I have failed many, many times, more than I have succeeded. I've probably succeeded from losing weight 2 times in my life. I did this about a decade ago. Now, luckily, it's happened again. But to add to what you're talking about this post, I almost want to share my screen because you got to see the car.
Go for it. And then if it doesn't let you, I'll give you authorization. Are you able to share it? Oh, perfect. Awesome. This is great.
Okay. So you got to see the car first. You can see this is not a great car. And so I'll read this verbatim. It says, a father said to his daughter, you graduated with honors. Here's a car I acquired many years ago. It is several years old, but before I give it to you, take it to the used car lot downtown and tell them I want to sell it and see how much they'll offer you. The daughter went to the used car lot, returned with her father and said, they offered me $1,000 because it looks very worn out. The father said, take it to the pawn shop. The daughter went to the pawn shop, returned to the father and said, the pawn shop offered me $100 because it's a very old car. The father asked his daughter to take it to the car club and show them the car. The daughter took the car to the car club, returned and told her father, some people in the car club offered me $100,000 for it since it's a Nissan Skyline R34, an iconic car and sought out after by many. The father said to his daughter, the right place values you the right way. If you are not valued, do not be angry. It means you are in the wrong place. Those who know your value are the ones who appreciate you. Never stay in a place where no one sees your value.
That's awesome.
It is awesome. I actually talked about that on my call this morning as well, because I said there was a book I read called The 12 Pillars about a month or two ago by Jim Rohn, and I highly recommend that book. I didn't even know about that book until 60 days ago, and now it's something that I'll probably read every quarter of the year because it's so valuable. And one of the things that talks about the pillars is knowing your value, you know, and sometimes even choosing different friends, you know, and I say this all the time, the group of friends I have in the last, I'd even say 12 months, but 24 months are much different than it was 5 years ago, because I've kind of changed my mentality. I want positive people. I want people with the glass half full. I want, you know, and granted, I have friends from high school that we go play cards and stuff every quarter or so. And there's times that gets pretty negative, or you have good times, but I just want positivity all the time, you know, and I know that you can't get that all the time, but if I seek it, I think I have a better chance of achieving something like that.
No, that's so true. So true. And again, you know, why we're all here right now, right? Like-minded, trying to learn from each other. So, okay. So that's a great story about the body shop. And so let's fast forward a little bit, because I know we'll have a lot to talk about with what you're doing now and where you're headed. And maybe, I don't know the best way to lead into this, but kind of talk about how you got started and when the light went off where you're like, this residential's awesome, but maybe something with commercials kind of calling my name.
Yeah. So about 4 years ago, I was helping a guy who, him and I at the time, probably 5 years ago, were teaching for HGTV shows, you know, like Tarek, Christina, Property Brothers, all that stuff. And so we got to know each other, and he was telling me that he was going to start getting into apartments, mobile home parks, and hotels. And he ended up getting a contract to go international to teach people from afar how to invest both in residential and commercial from their country. So over about 2 year period, I went to Australia a couple times. I went to Singapore, Hong Kong, Switzerland, London. And I went to these places teaching them how to be on Skype and to call into the United States and do that. And so I was just a consultant for him to sit down with people and to, you know, basically give them interest to have him mentor them, to be honest with you. So after I saw what he was doing for about 6 to 12 months, I said, man, how can I get some of this? You know, how can I get a piece of what you're doing? Not what your mentorship, but like learn, you know, can I work something out? So we worked something out, and he was charging a large amount of money. I mean, I ended up paying $75,000. And when I did that, I've already gone to another mentor since then, someone that does more triple net stuff, but which I can explain gross and triple net in a second. But when I was doing gross leases, apartments and stuff, you know, I thought, hey, this is the greatest thing ever. You know, I was under contract on 3 or 4 deals. I have a hotel in Boulder City, Nevada, you know, some apartments in Tennessee. And then when I saw something else, you know, on the triple net side, triple net being like if you owned a Wendy's building or something, you know, you don't have to pay the taxes, insurance, and everything. And there's a agreement that you have that you basically agree to receive checks over the next 6-7 years, and you don't have expenses. Yeah. So I started seeing that world, and I was like, wow, that's even more what I want. So I just kind of kept on, you know, seeing exactly what I want in commercial, because there's about, I don't know, 7 or 10 asset classes that you can choose from. And it's probably good to maybe have 2 or 3. Well, now I know my 2 or 3, you know, over the last, 2 years, and just continue to expand on that. And just recently, I actually kind of I started back into residential because I saw the pandemic and I saw there's going to be opportunity there, but I wanted something that is very systematic. I went to a class, and I was telling you a little bit before the call, I went to a class in February that was teaching systems and automation. And so it's not perfect, but it's something that, you know, we want to build over the next 6 to 12 months. And also have that same automation and stuff within commercial as well, because it's very possible.
Got it. Let's bookmark that. I want to come back to that and hear a little bit more about it. But again, a theme I'm picking up from you is you're learning from others that have been where you're at, or at least a little bit further ahead from you, that maybe have an expertise that you haven't acquired yet, or a capability, right? So, you know, back when you first started, you know, Jeff was a mentor coach, right? It sounds like you've had a few other coaches or mentors or groups you're a part of to just kind of push you to keep learning, right? And to keep growing. And you've never got it figured out. So I found huge value in that too. Sometimes it doesn't sound like it makes a lot of sense to pay much, but it keeps you accountable and it gets you a lot further ahead than you would just trying to create the wheel yourself the first time, right?
Totally. I mean, there's got to be a something in your head though, like I don't want to say a mind shift, but what I mean by that is I tell my kids this in basketball. I said, hey, you're coming to practice. We practice for an hour, hour and a half, and then you go home. It's just like in real estate. If all you do is you go to class, but you don't take and you don't practice after you're done you go practice on your own. Because I tell them, I'm like, you're not going to become a good basketball player if you just come to practice, but you don't work on your shot on your own.
Yeah.
And working on your skill. It's the same thing in real estate. And same thing with business. If you think, hey, by paying for a mentor, or if someone is going to just put their arm around me and just mentor me, whatever it is, a coach-mentor relationship, and I just spend the time with him at that point, and that's all I do, you shouldn't think that you're going to have success.
Yeah.
It's got to be stuff that you're going to do after that, and before the next time you see that person. So, because for me, and I'm not kidding, I am not a smart guy. But but if you just put it in the thing, I definitely are, as a person that I'm always practicing, I'm always learning.
Yeah.
I mean, there's a guy, I grew up in Mountain Green, and he said this story at his graduation. I did not know he was talking about me till the very end of the story, but he says, there was this kid, I would drive by his house to work and from work 3 or 4 days a week. And I would just see him outside, shooting, dribbling. And I'm sitting there listening to the story like, this is kind of cool. And he ends up saying it was Josh Zieglowski. And I was like, and I think because of all that practice and stuff, I ended up, starting when I was a sophomore in varsity and stuff. But it's one of those things and that's when you were introducing me a little bit with the story you said something about basketball. Oh, that was my love for basketball.
Yeah.
Because of sports has helped me have that desire of learning and practicing. And to be honest, I'm always trying to instill that with my own kids. It's not easy because you always say, this is what I did. You should do this.
Right.
Sometimes you have to take a step back and they got to figure this out on their own. Cause I did figure it out on my own. My dad helped me a little bit, nudged me a little bit, but at the very end of the day, it was me pushing myself and practicing all the time.
Well, and then you get momentum, right? Like, just like with your weight loss, it creates positive momentum, and then you see the results and you're like, well, that was cool. Something's working here. Let's just keep doing that. Right. And then as far as going back to your diet, then it becomes kind of like small ball with baseball. It's like, okay, I get like the calorie count helps, but then it's like all calories aren't created equal, right? Then it's like, well, wait, if I maybe have a little bit more of greens instead of just calories of like empty calories, maybe that. So it's like business. You can always drill down a little further. And Jeff Deering says, don't let him fool you. He is pretty smart, but he brings up a really great point here. Where you've been extremely smart is you're smart enough to know that you need to keep learning and gaining knowledge, right? Yeah. And so Lauren, you're awesome. Thanks for joining. She has a question for you. We'll just kind of bounce to questions whenever they're there. Have you found any great mentors or resources that have helped you create great systems and automations? Maybe let's take a detour because I want to come back to some of your deal structures of commercials. If you think it's okay to talk about this question for Lauren and maybe what you've just recently been doing, maybe it kind of answers the same question.
Yeah, I'll put a link in there. So the guy I went to the class with, his name's Matt Larson. So he's kind of known for being Dean Graciosi's top student, if you know who Dean Graciosi is.
Yep.
And this guy is complete automation. He is doing about 30 rehabs a month and about 20 to 30 wholesales a month, working 5 to 10 hours a week.
Wow.
And I've seen it with my own eyes. I've been to his office. I've seen he's got over, 600, 700 single family houses as rentals. He has this whole key. Yeah, it's nuts. But I'll actually put his website down here, and he has some products that you can look and just see, what fits you. But he completely helps with automation. And there's a lot of different parts, from hiring your own personal assistant. I mean, this is a world I didn't know, but my personal assistant, her name's Precious, and she's $3 an hour, and awesome. She does great. And I think everybody should have a personal assistant like that because, you know, the one thing the reason why I was really sold on this new system and the way he was showing me with virtual assistants was when I get into a commercial deal and I start negotiating it, now I'm over here, you know, vetting the deal, underwriting it, but I'm losing out on the opportunities of new deals because my focus is over here. This is what I was doing before. And then when I'm done with this, now I got to go raise capital, you know? And so you're losing opportunities because you're putting your time over here. And so now it's creating the systems of having someone doing your marketing, having someone do this. You know, I use this saying all the time. I said, John Rockefeller, he said, I'd rather make 1% on 100 people than 100% of myself.
Yep.
You know, and when you make that transition from residential to commercial, even if you're still doing both, that's fine. But if you have that mentality, I have that mentality to no end. You know, since February, I've entered in about 3 or 4 different partnerships outside of real estate, in oil, in Amazon, you know, and I'm gearing towards, hey, I'll put in this much effort and you put in this much effort and I'll take the minority ownership. I don't care. If you have the majority, then you got to take care of more of the day to day. And I can sit back and just kind of consult and help, you know, and that's my focus. Cause deep down, I always tell people I'm a lazy person. Like I literally want to just wake up and now I'm getting into golf lately. And so I'd rather just golf a lot, but unfortunately I can only go maybe once or twice a week.
Well, you know, it's just like when you're analyzing property, what you said, like what's the land or what's the property's highest and best use, right? Like what is your highest and best use, right? Individually, like where do you give the most value to yourself and to your bottom line, and then just drill down and do a lot more of that. And so that, you know, so thanks for that link, and Lauren, thanks for the call. And just a quick plug, because, you know, I like to, you know, connect people when I can. If anybody needs a really good short-term property manager for Airbnbs or even a long-term, hit up Lauren and Aaron and offline. So, all right, Josh, your first, let's talk about maybe successes you've had. Well, let's talk about your failures. Like I want to talk about a little bit about maybe deals that didn't work. And then let's talk about commercial deals that have worked. And then maybe we could highlight this 2019 purchase with that value add and kind of see how you did it. And then maybe dissect some parts in between.
Sure. My failure. So I use this when I was teaching for the Property Brothers and different people. People always want to know what your failures are. You can tell them 100 successes, but you tell them that one failure, that's what they want to hear, you know?
Yeah.
And my failure is, you know, because we have a lot of people from Utah here, so you got to understand this. So right before the mortgage meltdown, me and my partner were doing about 20 to 30 rehabs a year. And we were building up a lot of capital. I mean, I was probably 27, 28. And we had an opportunity to buy land and develop about 25 acres in Apple Valley, which is right through Hurricane on your way to Zion's National Park.
Okay. Yeah.
And we were told, you know, don't know if it was true or not now. I don't know how much I betted it, but they said, oh, you know, a couple big players like Donald Trump and some other ones are buying land around here to develop, you know, hotels. And you're kind of like, wow, you know. So we bought this 25 acres from a guy that was losing his house in Cedar City. And he had this land in his family. He's like, hey, we haven't done anything with it for years. We went over to it and there was a couple developments that were just starting. We're like, hey, right here, we could go do this. So we talked to some architects and we put plans together and we ended up buying it for cash for $800,000. And I put in 400, he put in 400. And then right before they were going to start digging, like almost 2 or 3 days before, the Bank of Southern Utah calls us and says, hey, we're not going to fund this anymore. Why? Oh, have you seen what's going on? Well, yeah, but you guys are just a local bank.
Yeah.
And like, oh no, we're done. We're not doing any construction. We're shutting down all building, everything. And so we're like, crap. So we had to kind of fire sell this property, and we didn't sell it for 2 years. We ended up selling it for little under about $160,000.
And you bought it for 800?
Yeah. Yeah. And which was considered a deal, I guess. But so I lost a lot of money. And the one thing I always tell people is to be honest, it's a lot of it, what I think was because I didn't have a mentor. And so what I would do now differently is, because I wasn't in development, I just thought, hey, I've flipped a lot of houses. I know real estate. I could do a development on my own.
Yep.
What I would do is I'd bring a partner in and say, hey, We have the cash, we have the banking resources. We just need someone to help us with the day-to-day. And with that, here's a percentage that we're willing to give up for that. And then we'll negotiate that, what that is.
Right.
That's how I would do it now, and so it's like what I tell with the basketball, my basketball players. I say, we either win or we learn, and I learned what I could do better at that point. So that's my ultimate failure. So I'm sure you tracked that, because I was in a similar spot in the downturn where we were flipping a lot of houses and then thought we could be, real estate developers on a small level. And my downfall was maybe a little bit opposite of yours. If we'd had cash, we probably would have been fine, but we leveraged a little too hard with, the wrong kind of money. And that's what doomed us. But have you tracked that project? Has it turned out? Yeah. No, I haven't. And actually I have a pretty big, I have 70 acres I'm working on in Hurricane right now. And I wouldn't mind going down there and taking a drive up to Apple Valley just to see. I do that. I don't know if it's to inflict, more pain and bad memories, or just to remind myself, like I'll purposely drive by like the land that I had foreclosed on me, or the houses that I had to short sell, right? Like I'll drive by those all the time and just kind of rehash. All right. Are we headed that way now? Am I making the right decisions? What am I doing? It's like to put salt on the wound.
Yeah. It's like, I mean, not that I want to relive it, but it's a good reminder.
Yeah.
So, well, maybe instead of jumping right to this next one, for those looking to get into their first maybe commercial deal, and you obviously had a ton of experience in residential and lending, and I'm sure the finance part made a lot of sense to you, but what was your first commercial deal that you as a principal what got into?
I'm going to go over the retail one with commercial rather than the apartment and
Perfect.
The hotel I have. So the first kind of retail one was the end of 2018 is when we started negotiating, and it's in Indianapolis. It's the one that you were saying we bought for $2 million. They were originally selling it for $2.8 million, and it was a city, like the city of Midvale, or it's called the city of Mooresville. It's just a suburb outside of Indianapolis. It's only probably 15 minutes from downtown, and we were buying it from them. They had a couple tenants there. One of them is Cinemark Theater. So like no one's going to movies right now,
Other than this weekend, they're starting, I heard.
Are they really?
Yeah.
I hope so. Well, they're okay till December 2021. If the movie business hasn't turned around by then, they're going to be shutting their doors. What they said, they have enough cash to last them that long, so that's good. But anyways, I just started what they call smiling and dialing. I was always thinking, hey, there's no deals in Utah. So, and that's mostly because my first mentor kind of instilled in my head of you always want cap rates. And so I was concentrating on the Midwest, that's why I smiled and dialed in Indianapolis. And the one thing I always learn is the deal is always behind the deal. So I'm talking to this broker one day and I'm asking about another deal. And then he said, and I was telling him what we're looking for. I'm looking for value add, retail, warehouse, and medical office. He goes, well, I have a retail center that one of my colleagues is going to list here in a little bit. Like it might already be listed. Well, it happened to be listed for just a couple of days for $2.8 million. We put in our contract for $2.4 million. And then when we were in our due diligence, because we bought it at a certain cap rate, I think it was like 9 at the time, or 8. We did our due diligence and we found out that their bookkeeping was terrible.
Mm-hmm.
In order to buy it at an 8 cap, we need to buy it for about 1.95, and which is another huge discount. We've already asked for 400 from 2.8 to 2.4. Now we're going to come back to them and get what they call a retrade of a new price. So we went to them and we showed them why we're coming back at this. And they said, you know what? If you can do 2 million, we'll do it. Because if it's below 2 million, the taxpayers will eat us up. They'll get so mad.
Got it. They'd have to disclose that.
By the city, So we're like, hey, we can do 2 million. So we end up doing 2 million. And then we have another 60 days due diligence. And while that's happening, we then called on Napa Auto Parts, end up taking a spot while we're in due diligence. And then now we had one spot left. And we ended up filling that spot about 6 months after closing with a place called Greek's Pizzeria. and put our valuation about 3.4 to 3.7 million.
That's awesome.
You know, and it kind of goes along. So I'm the principal of that deal, but I have two other partners. You know, I'm 35% ownership, and I tell people that because, you know, I have one of my partners. His name's Chris. He's in analytics. You know, he works full time with the company right now, but he's my analytics guy. So now that I always say, you got to stay in your lane with commercial. Know kind of what you're good at, and then stay in your lane. I know what I'm good at, and Chris knows what he's good at. So, and then we have another guy named Ryan, who he just is really good at raising money. He goes, hey, I'll raise money, and if I can do that, can I get a 15-20% ownership? And that's what we do every time. We do a lot of those deals. So that way you kind of have, you know, I have a three-headed monster per se. And
so, not to cut you off, but you're obviously your super skill in this is finding the deal, negotiating it, kind of generally putting it all together.
Yeah.
Got it. Perfect.
Yeah. And then there's a big piece after you close, you know, finding tenants, negotiating tenant leases, all that kind of stuff after too.
Awesome.
Yeah.
So I'm going to just ask you some questions specifically about that. You kind of answered it, but deal sourcing as it relates to this one or most of your deals, I mean, smile dial, right? Like you're very personable. You're just getting to know people, networking, making calls, asking questions. Do you have a list you source and use, or how do you go about finding? I mean, you know, how are you calling Indianapolis, right? Like, why is that even on your radar?
Yeah, good question. So now the stuff that I know now, there's plenty of deals in your backyard. I didn't realize that before. It's not about the numbered cap rate. Granted, that helps.
Yeah.
But I'll give you an example. As like I even talked about this on my CRE call this morning. As I said, here's one of the best ways you can market, and I'll give everyone on the call a goal. And this is if you're interested in commercial, is try to meet with a commercial broker once a week, whether it's for coffee or for breakfast or lunch. And the reason why I say that is in residential, if Matt, you're a realtor and I'm just either getting started or I'm trying to just network with more realtors to send me off market deals for flipping, I'm going to you and I'm saying, hey, you know, this is what I want to do. I'd love to get some of your business. Well, if you're a pretty decent realtor, you already have a list of probably 3 to 5 people. So now I'm number 6, right? In commercial, which everyone's called brokers. When I say broker, that's an agent, broker, anything. So in commercial, if I'm sitting down with Matt, now he has the hat on, he's a commercial broker. And I'm saying, hey, this is what I'm kind of looking for. Retail, warehouse, medical office, you know, A-class multifamily. Already Matt's going to think, okay, well, I might have someone. And let's say, I use this example. Let's say Matt represented Larry H. Miller at one time. Well, he's calling Larry H. Miller and he's saying, hey, I have a buyer that's looking for a warehouse. You mentioned to me that you might want to sell that warehouse in a couple of years. It's been a couple of years. Are you interested? Yeah. And he might say, you know what? Yeah, let's sell it. $2 million. And then, you know, I'm fast forwarding this, but Matt calls me and says, hey, this guy he has this property on 9th East. It's a warehouse. I think you're interested. He's asking $2 million. What do you think? And then I go do my stuff and come back, and then either it works or it doesn't work. But then I have a follow-up system with Matt. You know, every about 3 or 4 weeks, I'm dropping him a text or an email. Hey, still looking for deals. But you're actually trying to find deals that weren't even deals. Right. You know, whereas on residential, we all want the motivated sellers. Right. You know, it doesn't have to be motivation in commercial. And so as far as marketing, that's to me the best way. So I don't have a list. I literally, I'm reaching out to, I text 2 guys, a guy named Paul and a guy named Frank, after my CRE call, seeing if they wanted to hook up next week or in the week after. But I make that goal once a week to meet with someone. So if you're residential, I even highly recommend you do that, you know? And then if you don't know anybody, and then believe me, I didn't know anybody when I first started. The only person I knew is I was coaching, and one of my players' dads is a property manager for commercial. And I asked him, his name's Ben. I said, Ben, can you give me 5 or 6 brokers that you'd recommend I could start calling and working out deals with? From there, that expanded into more people. And I've gone on, you know, Crexy, LootNet, and I've searched different places in Utah on buying property. And I'll just call them and I'll just say, hey, would you want to meet up? I saw you have that property for sale. I'm not interested in buying it, but I'm interested in sitting down with you and see what you got.
That's awesome.
you know.
That's awesome. No, I love it. I love it. It at the end of the day, you don't really need to have that great of a plan other than just goes back to your whole story, right? Be willing to learn, be willing to ask questions, be willing to meet new people. All right, let's dive back into your retail. How did you finance this retail strip? Where did the $2 million come from to buy this thing?
So typically in commercial, you want to raise whatever your down payment is plus 5%.
Okay.
So, in other words, a $2 million deal, you went to the bank, and the banks, especially when you first start, you know, you want what they call a sponsor. You know, now I would be considered a sponsor. When I first started my first 2-3 deals before I got this retail deal, I was a minority owner. I just wanted my name on the resume so I could buy properties later. So let's say, you know, if they're looking at a borrower like Matt versus Josh, and they have both papers, and they say, hey, Matt's got an 800 score, but he doesn't have any commercial real estate. Josh has a 650 score, and he's got a couple of pieces of commercial real estate. Now they dive into it. What type of commercial real estate does he have?
Yeah.
Does he have retail? And at the time I didn't. So they adjusted my interest rate 0.5 point based on that.
Wow.
Right. But if they look and they say, hey, he's got multifamily, he's buying multifamily. Hey, we know that he can manage this, you know? So it has nothing to do with, you know, your score, your assets. They want to see your experience, you know, for the most part. The other stuff does come into play a little bit, but they do want to see the experience. So the retail side of things, I wanted to get into it, and I was willing not to bring on another partner and take the 0.5 point for that. So we came up 30% down, which was $600,000 plus 5%. Why we do 5% is you want cash in the bank when you close. So we raised, what is that, $700,000 in order to get into that property. We have a limited partner relationships with people. There's a couple different ways people can come into deals. One, you know, they want to make, 8 to 15% on their money ongoing and then get the appreciation, because there's 3 ways a limited partner can make money. Number one is they get a preferred rate of usually between 4 to 6%. Then whatever percentage owner they are. So if it's a $2 million purchase and they put in $200,000, that gives them 10% ownership. So every quarter when there's profit, they get 10% of the profit share.
Okay.
And then if we increase the value, like in this case, $2 million to, let's say we sell it for 3.6, $1.6 million, they get their $100,000 back plus 10% of that gain. So they'll get another $160,000 on top of that. So when that happens, what do they want to do? They want to do it again.
Yeah.
You know? So we approach limited partners in that way, and then the way of exchanging ownership for depreciation. I don't know if you've ever heard of that before.
Sure. Yep.
Yeah, we do that a lot.
That's awesome. And so you guys closed with a bank or commercial loan, 30% down, you got 5% in the bank. Where did you have to do any renovations other than just getting new tenants in place? And did you account for that up front, or did you have to go back and raise more money?
So we didn't have to raise more money, and we did account for that up front with what they call tenant improvements.
Okay.
We knew that the spot that needed tenant improvements, we'd need about $12,000 because it wasn't a big space, and that's why there's a pizza place there now. It's like a perfect place for them. But you talked about the financing. I didn't finish that, I guess. We got a recourse loan. So in other words, they had to cross-collateralize a couple of my assets in order to make that work. Sometimes, and this is what we try to do almost every property now, it doesn't happen all the time, but we try to get a non-recourse loan. In other words, we get into it, we might have to raise a little bit more money, but then there's no recourse. You know, if the property goes, SOL, they're responsible for it. You know, in typical those deals, they usually put like an 8 to 10 year prepayment penalty on them. The reason being is they want to make sure that asset keeps going for 8 to 10 years. Well, you think about, well, then how would you sell it in 2 years? In commercial, it's easier to do real estate strategies than it is residential. Like literally you can just say, hey, we're going to, assume the loan.
Right.
We're going to sell this on an assumable loan, and they're okay with that. It's pretty common, to be honest with you. So those non-recourse loans are obviously quite popular, but there's just you have to raise a little bit more money for those.
So are you guys pretty well set with the financing you have now? Or are you going to, with this new valuation, are you going to try and restructure your debt, maybe, recapitalize,
we just restructured it. So
you just did. Okay. Tell us about that to finish it off.
Yeah. So what happens? Yeah, I forgot about that. So right before COVID, and I'm sure they would have done it after, but the one thing we agreed upon at closing or when we took on the loan is like, okay, we're a recourse loan. We just put Napa Auto Parts, and if we find another tenant, can we renegotiate to a non-recourse loan? And they said, yeah, if you're 100% occupied, we'll renegotiate.
Awesome.
So we renegotiated. We got a point less and a non-recourse loan, and we didn't have to extend our loan or anything. We didn't have to sign new loan. Well, we did have to sign loan docs, just an updated interest rate and stuff, but no title company or anything like that.
So yeah, just internal like note modification. So did you restructure the amount of debt you have on it, or do you still have roughly what you started with, the 1.4 or whatever it is, $1.5 million?
We actually add another 100 grand because in our debt, because at the time as well, we have Walgreens is an out parcel, and they wanted better access for driving and stuff. And because we're the biggest center there, our portion was 100 grand for that. And in their portion, they were going to donate the land in order to make it happen. It actually helps out the valuation of my center because of it, but it cost me 100 grand up front. But then because it's triple net, I then build it to my tenants this next year.
Oh, sure. Yeah.
Yeah.
That makes sense. So what's your strategy? Let's see. Well, let me ask this, then I'll get to Lawrence, and then we're going to kind of wrap up. But what's your strategy with this one? Are you intentional with your strategy with your partners? Like this, we're going to target to hold for 5 years, then relook at it? Or are you just going to be opportunistic? Or is this one like, let's put this to bed and keep it forever?
So I always say, like a lot of people does, everything's for sale.
Sure.
And we usually have a 2 to 4 year plan. In other words, we're planning on cash flowing for that amount of time. In that 2 to 4 year mark, we might test the market as far as, because we have relations with brokers now. So we might email 12 to 15 brokers. Hey, we got an off market deal. We want to see if if you got someone to do a 1031, we'll just try and close this out and be done. And you can get commissions on both sides.
Right.
And so before we list it with someone, we thought we'd give you that option. And then they'll go to work and see if they can be on both sides of the transaction before we decide on one person to list it.
Perfect.
So we usually like to see that. However, I always go back to my mentor as well and have him kind of evaluate it and just see if it's a good time to test the market as well. Good.
All right, I got one kind of final question for you, but let's hit Lauren. Maybe explain that so it's clear to everybody how the exchanging ownership for depreciation works, and then what percentage of ownership or what percentage amount of depreciation. I think, Lauren, you meant depreciation instead of appreciation are you typically offering?
Yeah. So number one is, if you guys hit me up like this next week or two, I'm actually developing a video that's going to explain this very well for people, because people don't know about this. And this is a huge advantage when you quote unquote, raise capital for projects. Is like, my cousin's a good example. He's an anesthesiologist, and, he pays the IRS about almost 80 grand a year, in IRS, right? He's 1099, he pays the IRS about 80 grand as his tax bill. What we do is we say, hey, rather than paying the IRS 80 grand, pay us 80 grand, and then we'll exchange depreciation in the project. So that way you don't even pay the IRS $1. And now, 80 grand, let's say it's an $800,000 purchase, that would give him 10%. He makes a lower ownership percentage because of it, but now he doesn't have to pay the IRS any money. And then he rolls that money every time we have a new deal. He has to 1031 that money. Yep. Eventually he's going to pay tax on it, but it's almost like I always compare it, it's like a 401k.
Yeah.
Because a 401k, the purpose of it is over the next 10, 20, 30 years, you're building that up pre-tax money. And then when you retire, now your tax bracket isn't 30 or 40%, it's 10, and so there's even strategies that he can do, like rolling over to a Roth IRA and pay the tax now, but if he pays 80 grand to the IRS for 20 years, that's $1.6 million.
Yeah.
And it's gone. If he does it for 20 years and doesn't take this strategy, it's gone. Well, now he builds that up. In 20 years, he has 1.6 million. Even at 0%, he can now take and then pay tax on it, and then, use that money for whatever he wants to do at that point.
I love it. And this is going to be very applicable for sure. I know for Lauren and their strategy with their business, and probably for a lot of other people. What's going to be the best, maybe really quick before we wrap up with final questions. There you go. I had put Josh's number at the top of the text string in the chat, and then he just added it there. So that's great. So we're kind of wrapping up here. I think we could go for like 3 or 4 hours because you are loaded with content and a ton of good ideas. But, you know, as I think back to what we've talked about for the last hour, I love your say yes, jump in, commit yourself, get going, right? Sometimes you make the wrong decision, but 9 times out of 10, you're going to, you know, you keep saying yes a lot. You're going to quickly learn and have that gut instinct of like what you should say no to the more you say yes, right? And so then it's easier to say yes and get involved with the right things, right?
Right.
You have on your board your vision. I kind of want to like end with where you headed, if it's this year or later that you haven't hit yet, that you have written down, that you have in your mind's eye of like, this is where I'm headed. You had that with your weight loss, right? This is where I'm headed, right? You have this with whatever else you have on your vision board. But I kind of want to end this with some positivity and maybe your next action steps, right? Because I know I have some for me, and hopefully everyone else on the call's had some. But what's Josh's like next milestone, whether it's the near future or the long range?
It's kind of interesting. We've talked on commercial a lot. It's kind of on the residential side. There's been a project, I've been working on for a while, and building a team in place. And, I want that by the end of the year to be systematic, whereas, it's literally, like the book E-Myth talks about working on your business, not in your business.
Yep.
But you have to work in your business in order to make that happen. So that's one of my top goals this year right now, is to really make sure that's organized while I'm buying commercial real estate. Because I just went under contract on a deal in Bluffdale and a couple other deals here in Utah. And those ones don't take a lot of my time. What's taken my time, and I'm okay with the time now. Eventually, but my goal is to create that time. But come December 31st, I want to be at a point where it's almost like I'm spending 4 to 5 hours a week in the residential, and it's running better than it is today. It's got income coming in. Everyone's happy. My team is extremely excited and happy about it, and everyone's on the same page. We're all on the same page right now. It's just working those kinks out, and I think we're really close of really turning a milestone or turning the corner of making it happen. So I would say that's probably my top goal till the end of the year, because my commercial stuff's doing pretty well. I mean, obviously with COVID, you've been wanting to make sure you get an absolute killer deal in order to make it happen. Retail deals are deals that I'm very cautious of. I don't jump into it unless it's the way I can't even explain that right now, but I don't take a risk with retail deals right now. Warehouse and medical office, I'm willing to kind of go into it a little bit harder. Not to take a huge risk, but a very small risk, but definitely not retail right now with restaurants and stuff. And,
Well, we'll have to follow up and see, and keep us updated through, people that will either are following you or will start following you on social media with what you're doing. And I think it's awesome. And I can't wait to see where you're headed. And I know I've got a couple of, if I were to nail it down to one, I know like Lauren, I really need to get better at, the automation and the systematizing. So I'm going to look up, that's my action step, is to research a little bit about that real estate mat, and so I thank you for that, and look forward to rubbing shoulders with you live and in person here shortly. And hopefully we can do a deal down the road, or hopefully all of us on the call can, network and continue to do deals and get your vision board and keep crushing your goals, man. So Josh, I really appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks, man. I really appreciate it, and looking forward to get to know you more.
Okay, sounds good. Everyone have a great day. Thanks for joining, and we'll see you next week.